You're watching Conversationality, a bi-weekly show brought to you by Optionality, your community exploring the now of work. Hi, happy Thursday. Jory Jardins of Optionality here. And with me is Elisa Camahort page.
Happy Thursday. Hi, everyone.
Well, and as we do every other week on our live stream, we talk about things that are impacting the world of work, the future of work, how we work, what's different about work, anything that makes us work differently and think about our work. So it's sometimes not a direct hit, but this one we thought would be a good topic for this week. And this was more of a personal, I guess, time peg because Elisa and I were talking about what we do, who we do it for, and just because of our backgrounds. And I think much of what we've been experiencing, a lot of what we do has been really focused on women professionals and women, female executives. However, let's be clear, men work too. And men also have experienced a lot of the transitions, the issues that we all start to experience after years of working and questioning what we're doing and how we want to do it and impacts of the future of work. So we thought we would dedicate this episode to talking a bit more about how men are being impacted by the future of work. And Elisa, why don't you start by sharing some of what I guess triggered the discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the whole conversation about who we're for happened somewhat triggered by my brother actually introduced me to, he had met someone, a man at a function up in the city, a mixer, and what he was talking about his transitioning in work and being fractional. And he introduced him to me to talk about optionality. But then I was at a conference this past long weekend, and it is a small event, maybe 200 people, so intimate enough that you get to meet a lot of people and actually see them multiple times through the event. I mean, Jory's about to go off to South by, which is like the opposite of that experience, where it's massive, and you have to create your micro communities. This whole event was kind of a micro community. So I sat next to, at breakfast one morning, I sat next to a gentleman, and he asked me what I did, and I gave him a brief on optionality and a more optionality-driven life and blah, blah, blah. And he starts telling me this story. And he's a professor. He's in academia. And he and his wife are both actually professors, but they teach at different universities and they kind of live someplace in between. And he had almost an hour commute to get to his office. And he told me that when he started at the current university he's at, he just went in every day because that is what he had always done. And he assumed that's what he would do. But it added this 2 hours to his day. And he used the word, he got really burnt out. But he went further than that. And he talked about how, it affected all areas of his life because he got home, he was cranky, he was exhausted. He couldn't really contribute in the same ways he wanted to. He said it made him have a worse personality and worse relationships and physically less healthy. And he just was kind of spiraling down until a colleague of his, another man, professor, said, why? Because he only taught 2 days a week. That's the thing. So professors have a whole bunch of stuff, research, writing, office hours, whatever. They have a whole bunch of stuff they do besides teach classes. And his colleague said to him, why are you coming in on the days you don't have class or office hours? Why are you doing that? And he just was like, oh, I hadn't thought about it. And so he said now he goes in for sure 2 days, the 2 days he teaches in his office hours, and maybe a half a day on one of those other remaining 3 days. But for sure, he works at least 2 days a week from home. And it's transformed how he feels about himself, how he feels about his work. He brought up that there was something that if something had gone wrong at work or they had asked him to accommodate something back in the days when he was working 5 days a week in the office, he probably would have gotten really bent out of shape. The example he used is, if they told me I had to move my lab, if they told me that now, I'd be like, hey, no big deal. Here's what I need. Tell me where to go. He goes, if they had told me that when I was coming in 5 days a week with a 2-hour commute every day, I would have been so bent out of shape. I would have gotten really angry and felt really disrespected. And so it was really interesting how he talked about it in such a holistic way about how it changed his life and his perspective and his personality and his attitude and his relationships. And I was thinking to myself, do I hear men talk about this issue like this very often? And I will say this guy's a professor of psychology, so maybe he's a little more used to connecting the dots of what's going on in your life and how you feel about
Where,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, more aware, self-aware. But I was really struck by it. And then at the same time, the other thing I was saying to Jory when we were kind of talking about, oh, what should we talk about, is that I've gotten really annoyed in the last few years about this term imposter syndrome. And obviously we could do a whole treatise on that. But I have felt it has become somewhat gendered. Like people talk about it when it comes to particularly women and other underrepresented communities, people of color, LGBT, and they talk about it like it's something we need to fix about ourselves. Like, oh, if you could just overcome your imposter syndrome, have confidence, and and you'll get ahead more. And there's two things I think about that, which is sometimes imposter syndrome has external influences, like you aren't being treated as respectfully or credibly as you deserve. Like people are asking you to go get the coffee because they don't realize you're the boss, or they are, a dude is repeating what you say and everyone goes, ah, when they never noticed when you said it. Like that stuff happens. That's telling you that, you're an imposter, right? So that is the one thing, is that, it totally ignores that sometimes it's the external culture that's influencing that. But the other thing, and that it tells me, is that when I've ever read about it, men feel these feelings too of imposter syndrome. It is not a gendered experience to worry about, are people going to respect me? Do I belong in this room? And then Jory, you told me you actually read something, like all the stuff I remember reading about it is like years ago, but you've read something recently about this.
I was pretty surprised by it. So I read Corn Fairy content religiously. I subscribe to their newsletter, and I do it because I'm not in the corporate C-suite, but it keeps me very up to speed on what's going on in the corporation. And they do an annual study on the state of being a CEO. The title of it exactly escapes me. I will put that. We'll have to share that when we share the notes. But this year they ran an analysis, and I mean, it kind of, despite the fact that CEOs are paid more than they've ever been and that their average pay over the last even 5 years has gone up, it kind of sucks to be a CEO in the corporation these days. There's so many stressors. Their growth is a lot harder to come by for many reasons. But one of the things that really struck me was about 7% of CEOs that they had surveyed were female. So the rest presumably are male. And yet 71% of the CEOs reported experiencing imposter syndrome.
Wow.
I think even the more surprising than that stat was that men even admitted to that, right? Because I can see CEOs saying like, yeah, no. I mean, no, I just don't. I don't. Yeah, I'm stressed. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm up for the task, but I don't have imposter syndrome. So I was surprised by that stat on a number of levels.
That's a lot, like 71%. I suppose if we asked our friend Maura Aarons-Mealy, who kind of, specializes in mental health and anxiety in the workplace, she wouldn't maybe be surprised by that stat. But because I'm not surprised by the only 7% of CEOs that were interviewed were women. Like that's like, oh yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
And so that's why I actually think it's damaging to have most conversations about imposter syndrome or burnout or even work-life balance, to have them focus on women, because it reinforces that women have more life to balance with their work, and that's just a given, that women have, are the ones who more predominantly have emotional repercussions from their work. I think it reinforces stereotypes about women to have so much of the public conversation about any of those topics, focus on women who are experiencing it. I actually think there's a benefit to like widening the aperture and saying, you know what, this is a human condition. I don't know if you remember, Jory, but um, when I used to interview men at Blog Her, so the big Blog Her, we didn't have a male keynote for years. But at Blog Her Food, particularly, lots of it was more, we decided early on that it was men who were sort of having their light hid under a bushel in the food blogging world, that there were lots of great male food bloggers and they didn't get as much attention as some of the women. So we kind of asked the community. I remember this so clearly. We surveyed the community of our food bloggers. Are you cool with men being represented pretty fully? And everybody was cool with it. So I interviewed quite a number of male food bloggers at Blog Her Food. And when we did Blog Her Health, I interviewed. And I remember there would always come a point in the interview when I would say, so-and-so, you do this and that and this and the other thing, and you're married and you have 2 kids. How do you do it all? And it would always, our audiences were still predominantly women. And it would always get this big laugh, because women are so used to being asked these questions when men are not. But you know what? The guys had answers. Like they answered because they do think about that stuff and they do have to manage their work and life together. So I think it's always great to be reminded of that.
Well, and I keep thinking, when you brought that up, hey, I think we also apply to men. While maybe primarily women are raising their hands and saying this really applies, I have thought about my career totems, people who are doing things that I want to do because they're living their best portfolio lives.
Yeah.
And I just interacted with 2 former colleagues. One I'm working with again on something, and they're living it. And maybe when we talk about imposter syndrome, women may feel like, oh, I can't do that. I think men have said for a long time, oh, well, this is how I'm going to do it. It's all good. It's fine. I can because I can, which we can too, right? I'll give you an example. So a friend, Joe D'Annunzio, we met back when I was a entrepreneur with Blog Her, and he was he was a consultant then too, but he worked with P&G, Procter and Gamble. He had worked there, and then he became a consultant. And his wife decided to change her career. She went back to veterinary school, and that was at
Wow.
UC Davis. And he picked up the family. They had a family and moved to Davis, and he kept up his consulting, but it was really focused on her shift. And then he got involved with the university. He's at UC Davis, and he now leads the Center for Entrepreneurship while running his consultancy. So he
Wow.
lectures as well. Let's just add another little bit. And he's building again. He's actually built several startups in the process. So, I mean, this is the life, right? This is what we dream about, is being able to fit all this in and do so in a way that is only additive to all of the pieces. He's a
Mhm.
great example. And I was reminded of that when I spoke with him today or last week. The other one was someone that I had met again in my corporate life, who we caught up after 10 years. And I couldn't help but notice that he wasn't in his office. He was actually in his Sprinter van, because his company is doing great, better than ever, but he bought a farm. And so he spends time between LA and his horse farm. And so he has to
Wow.
take meetings in the van, right? Because he's in transit all the time, but this is what he wants. And he has the best of all worlds. So again, I realize this isn't just a female thing, like, oh, we've got, or a caregiver thing, or it's about a lifestyle, and whatever that looks like, how do you enable that? And how do we normalize that? I don't think he would have been able to grow his company if people had said, ooh, I don't know, you shouldn't be taking those calls from the Sprinter van
Yeah.
as your company has grown 4x over 4 or 5 years. I mean, unreal. It's all possible, right? These are my career totems as well.
Yeah, last night I went to a book launch event for Dr. Angela Jackson, who is a professor at Harvard and leads a research team there. And she has a new book coming out. Win the oh shoot, the win-win workplace. Thank you. The win-win workplace. And her whole thing is about helping companies listen to employees and be flexible in their approach to what would actually compel these employees. And we talked a lot about generational differences, and which was interesting. But we also talked about like people, that the same benefits don't mean the same thing to every person. So one company that she was talking about that she consulted with, they were offering a 401k match and couldn't understand why so many of their employees weren't taking them up on it. And part of me had a very kind of, the age I'm at, I was like, oh my gosh, even if those people are young, they should take that, start building that now, compound interest. Like, you're going to miss the value of compounding. And all of that is true. But when they were lamenting, they're not taking advantage of it. She asked them, well, what do they say? And they hadn't really asked the employees, why aren't you doing this? And what it turned out is that it was a great idea. They liked that the company offered it, but some of them were in situations either paying off student loan debt or taking care of parents or sending money home to a family, in some other part of the world. And they really needed the money for other things. They had more urgent needs. And so they shifted so that there were other options available. The investment didn't change, but the options that they gave to people changed so that it could be more bespoke for the person. And really, they appreciated the offer, but they really felt loyal and compelled over making it something that worked for them individually. And when I think about like these ideas of what causes burnout, what destroys work-life balance, what makes people feel they don't belong in the room, like it still comes back to that idea of listening to the people who are there. We make policies sometimes for mythical people. We sort of make procedures for some model of what a person is. And that at the end of the day, people have stuff going on in their lives. And, I think the pandemic really broke this idea. You couldn't help but know what was going on in someone's life because you were seeing, people see my cat is over there asleep in her bed. But a lot of times she jumps on this table, she walks behind me, she settles in this, which is not a cat. Oh, you can't see it because I have the blur on. It's not a cat bed. It's like a basket with I put a towel in there because she kept sitting in it. And we are being humanized every day because people see what we surround ourselves with. And I guess I think we should do the same for all of these things and realize that they're not gendered. Everybody has emotions. Everybody has feelings. Everybody has a life. And I don't know. It was really interesting that the confluence of this person I met, the study you read, kind of just bubbled that right up to the surface for me. That we're all in this together. We all have these issues.
There was one other stat in the survey, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but it is a definite trend of the stressors for the modern day CEO. It's employees who are much more empowered than ever to speak up and question.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And some people don't like that, but
yes, exactly. Well, and I think that we became more attuned to that over COVID. And I know from some of the research I had done at that time that more and more attention was paid to how employees are perceiving their workplace, right? And they will speak up. I think we're in an interesting time now where we still can't we can't speak up completely. I think, while DE&I is still being suppressed in many organizations, but by and large, that ship has sailed. Employees are much more empowered. They want to inform their leadership of what will make it easier to do their jobs, what will enable them more, what will help to remove the stressors, which that was never a factor before. And yes, it puts more stress on the CEOs, but
Yeah.
you just got to go with it.
Well, I think the problem is it puts a lot of stress on the management layer. Like all these people aren't really raising their voices to the CEO directly, unless it's a quite small company. They're raising it to their manager, and then their manager's raising it to their director, and then their direct. And a lot of companies, the path to promotion is to become a people manager when there isn't always a lot of support for learning how to be a good people manager. And so a lot of that, I think the people in the middle, the people who are kind of squeezed in the middle between employees who feel more empowered to ask for what they need or to share when something isn't working, they're squeezed between them. And I think probably a C-suite that in many cases are just like, I don't want to hear it. Like, I pay you, do the job, and I mean, we see that from some of the public pronouncements of some of the CEOs of the biggest companies. We're going to do this. And like, if you don't want to do that, then maybe you don't fit here. And I mean, that's a recipe for something, but, but I think it's the managers who get squeezed in the middle. And that can burn you out really quickly, I think, when your people are unhappy and you don't really have the tools to make it better. I mean, what's worse? It's terrible to know the people who work for you, who you hired because you respect them and think they're good at their job or whatever, and you are not empowered as a manager to come back to them with solutions. I think that what could be more contributory to stress and burnout than that.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up, Elisa. You have dusted off my original theory that yes, I think we do still apply to women, but we do apply to men too. And just like there were male bloggers who had wonderful female readerships, so are there male workers who are rethinking the way that they are working and finding ways to make it work for them. And we can learn a lot from them because I think they've been doing this longer. Right? Making it work for them.
Yeah. Just think about all the salespeople you ever worked with who, like, it was expected they would be out in the field, but, how much of the time were they really at a customer's or on the way to the customer? I think there is a lot of freedom in that out in the field position, which are a lot of those positions are dominated by men. And I think they got a lot more earlier taste of you got to get your work done. You got to make your numbers. That's all it's about. And how you do that, you're free to do that. Go out in the field. So I think we all are a little bit out in the field, and that's okay.
I love this. There's like 3 quotes I'm going to pull from here. Right out of the gate. Good one, Elisa.
Thanks. I just thought of it right now. I've never said that out loud before, but all right. Thanks, everybody. That's it for this week in Conversationality. And for those of you who are Optionality members, you'll be getting this video in a post so you can refer back to it. It's also available on our YouTube channel, our Optionality Life YouTube channel. And come visit us at optionality.life and check it out. And please join us and talk about how we can all explore having a more optionality-driven life that helps stave off burnout, issues with work-life balance, and especially imposter syndrome.